Antibiotics are a type of antimicrobial drug used in the treatment and prevention of bacterial infections. They may either kill or inhibit the growth of bacteria. Antibiotics should not be used in any case other than serious bacterial infections. Sadly, this is rarely the case. Many pharmacists and doctors often misprescribe these powerful medications. As a result, these bacterial infections are evolving, and this evolution is dangerous in many ways because as this bacteria evolve, they become more and more immune to our commonly used antibiotic medications. These immunities have become so serious that there was a woman recently in Nevada who died of a simple bacterial infection, only because it evolved so far that almost 26 different types of antibiotics didn't work on it. Because of this scary truth, I decided to go out and ask normal people and a couple of trade professionals a few questions to gain their knowledge and awareness on this delicate subject. The following are several video or audio interviews. Alright, Andre, start by introducing yourself.
Hi, my name is Andre. You kind of just said my name.
So, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about antibiotics just to see how much you know.
Okay.
Question 1. What are antibiotics?
They help you.
How? Do you know? Answer with your full knowledge and intent.
Okay. They help you get better.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Next question.
Yep.
What are antibiotics prescribed for?
I don't know. I think viruses maybe, or infection. I don't know. I'm actually not sure.
Okay. Next question. Have you ever been prescribed antibiotics? If so, how much? And what antibiotic? If you remember. If you don't, it's fine.
I think it was for strep throat. It was an
Okay.
antibiotic. I'm not sure how much.
Okay.
I remember it was for strep throat.
Okay. Next question. What are the dangers of antibiotics, if any?
I feel like you could depend on antibiotics if you take too many, or if you take them constantly for like small little like problems. I think that's the only problem.
Okay.
Or maybe overdose. I'm not sure.
All right. Final question. If you were prescribed antibiotics, would you take them as the doctor prescribed? Would you take more, or would you take less?
As the doctor prescribed.
All right. So, first start by introducing yourselves.
I'm Sarah Burton. I'm Tina DeMarchian.
Okay. So, I'm just going to ask you guys a couple of questions to gauge your knowledge about antibiotics. Question 1. Feel free to answer in whatever format you guys want. I don't really know. What are antibiotics?
They can come in the form of pills or liquid, and they're medicine that you take to try and attack the flu or any kind of sickness that you have.
Yeah, I'd say it's just medication to help whatever illness or disease, or just to help fight germs or whatever.
Okay. Or whatever.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Question 2. What are the dangers of antibiotics, if any?
Isn't it possible that they can attack the good germs in your body as well as the bad ones, and then your immune system can get really messed up?
There's a possibility that if too much is taken, like an overdose, it could kill you, or you can have allergies to the medication, or yeah.
Okay. Question 3. If you were prescribed antibiotics, would you take them more or less than the doctor's prescription? Or the same amount? Or would you just follow them to the word?
I'd probably follow the word, but if anything, I guess I would do less rather than more to be on the safe side.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Have you guys ever been prescribed antibiotics?
Yes, many times.
Okay. If so, do you remember your prescription?
No, I have it at home right now.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know my prescription. I'm only supposed to take 2 pills a day in the morning for my migraine.
Oh, like that? Like a dosage?
Yes, but I was curious about the actual antibiotic.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Okay.
I think mine is like a mixture of magnesium and a bunch of different vitamins.
Are you sure that it's an antibiotic?
It's an antibiotic,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
What was the question?
What type of infections or diseases
Oh.
or sicknesses should antibiotics be used for? If you know.
So I'd say infections, I would say definitely would require antibiotics. I guess some diseases like a cold or something, I wouldn't really go to the doctor for antibiotics just because it can pass on its own. But like things like infections, I would personally get antibiotics for.
I don't know, if you go to the doctor and they like seem to think that you need antibiotics, I think I would trust their judgment and take it.
Okay. Vahan, start by introducing yourself.
My name is Vahan. I'm Vahan, and my friends call me Vahan.
Alright. So, I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions about antibiotics just to gauge your knowledge. One, what are antibiotics?
Like medicine and stuff.
Alright. Question two. What are the downsides of taking antibiotics?
If you take
Or
too many,
dangerous.
yeah, if you take too many, it's not good.
Fair enough. I would like you to answer to the best of your knowledge, please. Next question. In what cases should antibiotics be used, if you know? You have no idea?
Nah.
Okay. Next question. Have you ever been prescribed antibiotics?
Nope.
Okay, that takes care of the follow-up question as well. Final question, if you were prescribed antibiotics right now, would you take them as prescribed, would you take more, or would you take less?
I would take them as prescribed.
Right.
I don't know why.
You would follow your doctor's instructions. Good. Alright, so you can start by introducing yourself.
I'm Stefan.
Alright, so I'm just gonna ask you a couple of questions about antibiotics just to gauge how much you know.
Okay.
So question one, what are antibiotics?
Antibiotics are used for curing bacterial infections.
Okay. Question two, kind of like straining off your first answer, what exactly are antibiotics used for?
Curing bacterial infections, I think.
Question three, what are the dangers of antibiotics, if any?
They can manipulate the genome of specific diseases or infections to the point where we become so infused with the fact that our genomes become to the point where there's like we become susceptible to new infections because we have super genes now that we take these antibiotics or antibacterial
Okay.
things.
Okay. Next question. Have you ever been prescribed an antibiotic? If so, do you remember your prescription?
I don't think so.
Okay. Last final question. If you were prescribed antibiotics now, would you take it as prescribed? Would you take it more than the doctor prescribes, or would you take it less?
It depends on what I'm taking it for.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's start the interview by you introducing yourself.
My name is Dave Vartanian.
Okay. So I would like to ask you a couple of questions about antibiotics just to gauge your knowledge about them. So
Sure.
question one, what are antibiotics?
Antibiotics are a type of medication, like penicillin, used to fight bacterial infections.
Okay, good. What sicknesses or infections should antibiotics be used on?
Like deep cuts, wounds, stuff like that. Then things that where your flesh is exposed to bacteria, sort of like bacterial infections.
Okay. What are the dangers of antibiotics, if there are any?
Well, if you use too many antibiotics, they can weaken your immune system by targeting bacteria that can be vital to your health. Also, when too many people use antibiotics, the bacteria that's being suppressed can evolve to be immune to the antibiotics, and it will become more powerful, and we might not be able to handle such a powerful bulk of bacteria, and we might not be able to like suppress the germs or whatever.
Okay. Next question. Have you ever been prescribed antibiotics? If so, how much and what antibiotic?
I have not.
Okay. Final question. If you were prescribed antibiotics by a doctor, would you take more or less of the antibiotic? If so, why?
Can I take?
Or you can take exactly as prescribed.
I'll take the amount prescribed, but I guess it depends. If I have a very deep infection, I think I might take a little bit more. But if it's like a minor infection and I think the doctor's prescribing too much, I might not take as much as he's asking for, just to be a little safe.
Okay. Thank you. That's all. All right. Let's start the interview by you introducing yourself.
Hello, I'm Mac. I'm Eddie's classmate.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about antibiotics just to see how well you know about them.
All right.
Question 1. What are antibiotics?
Chemically, I'm not really sure, but I know that the job they do is to, like, kill certain types of cells.
Right.
Or things that aren't cells, like, I don't know if antibiotics can kill viruses. I'm not sure. That's one thing I don't know.
Okay. Question 2. When should antibiotics be used?
Antibiotics should be used when you have some kind of bacteria in your system that's negatively affecting your ability to do whatever it is you need to do, and you know what kind of antibiotic will kill that bacteria. You shouldn't just use it use them like willy-nilly, because that'll just kill your gut fauna, or flora, rather.
Okay. What are the dangers of antibiotics, if any?
First of all, you get like antibiotic resistance. So if you, do you want to refilm that?
No, it's okay.
If you take too many antibiotics to address a single issue, you might gain a resistance, or the bacteria might gain a resistance to those antibiotics. And when you get a surge in them in the future, they won't die to the same treatment. And then also, if you take too many antibiotics, you run the risk of also killing the bacteria in your gut and getting like nasty stuff.
All right.
As a result.
Question number 4. Have you ever been prescribed antibiotics? If so, how much? And what antibiotic?
Yes, I have had sinus infections, so I've taken azithromycin for 5 days a few times. And then also I was on minocycline for acne for about 2.5 years.
All right. Well, could you tell me the concentration of the 2 antibiotics? If you know it. If you don't, it's fine.
I don't know for sure, but I think it was like a standard Z-pack of azithromycin, just a 5-day course.
Yeah.
And then for the minocycline, I think it was 90 milligrams of minocycline.
Okay.
Daily.
This is the final question. If you were prescribed antibiotics again, would you take them as prescribed, more or less?
It depends on the issue, because I don't know if normal... I'd say that I generally err towards taking as prescribed, but if I deemed it necessary, I might take a little bit more.
All right.
Just based on the fact that I might have larger than normal issues.
All right. Thanks. That's all.
Cool.
All right. So, can you start by introducing yourself?
Yep, my name is Jonathan Perry, Perry. At this point, I'm a retired pharmacist.
Okay.
So, if you want more, I'll give you more credentials. Been for
right,
Georgia Poison Control, clinical pharmacy at Emory University Hospital. Done some retail work, university work.
Thanks. That sounds beautiful. That's okay for now. I'm just gonna jump straight in.
Okay.
The first question might be a little too obvious, but I feel like it's still necessary to ask. What are antibiotics?
Well, antibiotics are anti-infective agents. Mainly we think of them as chemicals that will work in medicines that will either reduce the number of bacteria. They usually refer to bacteria that we're fighting, pathogenic bacteria, ones that can harm you. And they are either intended to slow the multiplication of those bacteria in your body or outright kill them.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question is, when should antibiotics be used, and when shouldn't they be used?
Yeah, they are totally the only time they should be used is against pathogenic bacteria, or ones that the pathology is, not good, meaning that you can die from that or be harmed in some permanent way. They are completely ineffective against bacteria and fungi, which are also can be really problematic and kill you also, but they're completely ineffective. Strictly, they're just bacterial agents. So there are antivirals and antifungal agents, separately, which some people lop into the antibiotic family, but, really need to keep those distinctions clear.
All right. The next question, kind of more towards the actual subject of my interview.
Okay.
What are the dangers of antibiotics?
Well, they, on the simplest level, they are a foreign agent. They're another chemical we put into our body. They may have side effects. Nothing is completely side effect free, even when you hear that. They may interact with other medicines that the person needs to take for other conditions. They can interfere with birth control, for just one example. And women can get pregnant while taking an antibiotic, even their own birth control. So there are a lot of unintended, untoward consequences. They can, while killing the bacteria, the bacteria may release endotoxins and different, death chemicals from themselves that can be hazardous. So,
all right.
But if we use them judiciously, like what they're really intended for is to save you when when you have a really bad infection, one that would kill you more times than not if you didn't take it. That's their major use.
All right. Thank you. The next question, more towards you as a pharmacist. How often do you think antibiotics are misprescribed?
Percentage-wise, hard to say, but half the time, or even more, perhaps. Depends on I'd say the geographical area, the education level, socioeconomic level of the people that are being prescribed these things. The expectations of the public. So, and the doctors respond. They're humans. They respond to that kind of stuff, and the pressure from the pharmaceutical industry on the doctors. There's all these factors that come in, and any individual doctor can be very high in some doctors and quite low in others. So on average, some doctors are, I would say, way over 50% prescribe antibiotics when inappropriate. And others, under, but I'd say everybody overprescribes them a little bit, and maybe 20% of the time there probably would be a fair guess.
Perfect. Thank you. So the final question I'm going to ask is going to start with a little bit of a statistic brought to you by the WHO chairman, the World Health Association, Margaret Chan, who mentioned in a speech that within the 21st century, most modern antibiotics could become completely obsolete. Do you think this is true?
Broad statement, I would say, with caveats, that's true. What she means by that is they won't become ineffective. What has happened, which happens throughout nature, anytime we apply a chemical to rid ourselves of another organism, or whether it's even insecticides against insects, the same issue. The nature has a way of saving, the intended organism, and so they have resistance to. They perform, they develop resistance, and as things are overused or not judiciously used, and even if they're used correctly, eventually enough of the organisms survive, and they, through natural mechanisms, and they're the ones who survive and pass on their genes.
Darwinism.
The ones that are getting killed don't have that chance, right? And so there's a natural bias to, as we use any antibiotic, that over time it will become ineffective. And it's only made worse by the over-prescribing and inappropriate prescribing and the use in other areas like, raising livestock and putting it in animal feed and stuff like that, which is now, on the wane, but that was a big issue.
So first, can you start by introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Dr. Edward Orlov. I'm a physician and studied in medical school as well as some internal medicine, so can give some of the clinical perspective on antibiotic resistance.
Okay. The first question may be a bit too obvious. What are antibiotics?
Got it. So antibiotics are a class of drugs, again, probably a couple dozen of them, that have the property of killing bacteria. So again, the typical biotic is a bacteria as opposed to, say, a virus or a single-cell parasite.
All right. Thank you. Question 2. When should antibiotics be used and when shouldn't they be used?
Good question. So antibiotics should be used in situations where there is a high likelihood of a bacterial infection that results in clinical symptoms or signs of an infection and is unlikely to get better without the use of antibiotics. Was there a second part about when they shouldn't be used?
Yes.
Yes. So antibiotics should not be used in situations where there's a good chance you do not have a bacterial infection. The common example being most upper respiratory infections like colds and flus are actually viral in nature as opposed to bacterial in nature, and therefore it is not, the antibiotic actually doesn't destroy the bacteria the way it would the virus the way it would a bacteria.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Next question. What are the dangers of antibiotics, if any?
Yes, so there certainly are. All antibiotics have some side effects. All medications have some side effects. I'd say the common to antibiotics are frequently upset stomach because they are destroying some of the healthy bacteria that you have in your gastrointestinal tract. Many of them can cause allergic reactions like fevers or rashes. And certainly probably one of the biggest adverse effects of antibiotics is this concept of antibiotic resistance.
All right, perfect. Thank you. As a physician, how often do you believe antibiotics are misprescribed?
Are misprescribed. So again, probably the commonest population in which this is happening is in primary care, people seeing their doctors for colds and flus. And I think a fair amount of them end up receiving antibiotics without a high chance that the infection is bacterial. More likely it's viral. So again, hard to quote a percentage, but I would estimate 30% of antibiotic prescriptions in the primary care setting are not indicated.
Thank you. Perfect. So right before I introduce the last question, I'm actually going to tell you about a quote from Margaret Chan, who is the HWO chairman.
Okay.
The quote goes as follows. Within the 21st century, most modern antibiotics could become obsolete. Do you believe this quote? If so,
yes.
could be
I think it's absolutely very likely. So I think there is now a case report of an infection, a bacterial infection in a woman treated in again, I don't recall whether it was Europe or the United States, who had a bacteria that was resistant to all known antibiotics. So for such cases, again, as we use more and more antibiotics, so again, I haven't defined antibiotic resistance. I think it would be helpful to know that to answer this question. Antibiotic resistance happens when we use antibiotics more frequently, sometimes inappropriately. Bacteria change and evolve genetically to try to outsmart the antibiotic being used. They develop resistance to that antibiotic. And as we use more and more antibiotics, more and more resistance is being developed. So the bacteria are evolving to have features that do not respond to the antibiotic. And now we're in a position where many bacteria have features that are resistant to antibiotics. The hospitals are full of antibiotic-resistant organisms, and that problem is continuing to get worse, such that there's now at least one case report of a bacteria that is resistant to all known man-made antibiotics.
Thank you. That was perfect.
In conclusion, it is clear that among average people there are many misconceptions on the uses and effects of antibiotics. But nonetheless, it is obvious that most trained professionals know what they're talking about and are well educated on their topic. Sadly, this is not enough to prevent certain physicians from misprescribing these necessary but dangerous medications. I think that it is important to be aware of these dangerous events that are happening all around us. Maybe the next time you, the viewer, are prescribed an antibiotic,